Welcome back to week 4 of our self-portrait project that we've been working on together. I'm glad you're here. Today we're going to finish it up. We're going to start by sharpieing the pencil sketch, and then we're going to erase all the pencil out from underneath it, and we will finish by adding color to our beautiful self-portrait. So I'm going to give you a bunch of different options of how you can add color, and I can't wait to see how your masterpiece turns out. So all you're going to need right now is the map that we've been working on, the pencil sketch of your face. You're going to need your skinny tipped Sharpie, and then you can wait on collecting all of your colors because I'll give you another chance to do that partway through the video. So we'll start with the Sharpie, and you'll need a nice eraser to get rid of all that pencil. So pause the video, get your supplies, and I will meet you back here. Thank you. So I have my abstract side and realistic side of my self-portrait complete with my sketch. And before we can add any kind of color, I want to outline it in a skinny Sharpie, just so I can get all the details very bolded. And then what I'll do after I use the skinny Sharpie is use an eraser to get rid of all of the pencil lines. So what's left is just the Sharpie outline of my face. You might want to use a big eraser rather than the one on the end of the pencil because it'll be easier to kind of get all those lines erased with a bigger eraser than a skinny small eraser. So go ahead now and start sharpieing. I am going to show you the time lapse, the speeded up version of me sharpieing this self-portrait. Here's my setup for starting to add color to my self-portrait. I've decided to use some watercolor paints and crayons, and I also have a bunch of different markers that I set aside. I mentioned in the last video that you could use colored pencils or any other type of paint that you might have besides watercolors. You might have acrylics or even oil paints, which make a bit of a mess, so be careful with those. But whatever you have at home, I'm encouraging you to use. And I'm also suggesting that you use more than one type of way to add color. So instead of only doing watercolor or only doing crayons, see if you can combine your techniques. And I made a little chart here for you, just so you can see the difference in how things are used and how they turn out. This top line here is a marker, a colored pen, and you can notice that it's thinner. You don't want to be creating big spaces with marker, coloring in big spaces. Number one, your marker might run out, and number two, it takes a long time and a lot of ink to color in a lot of space with marker. So I use marker for my fine details. So little things that you want to make bold, I would use my marker for. Then you have colored pencil underneath there. You can see it's a lot lighter. You can always color darker, but colored pencil usually turns out lighter than marker and lighter than the crayon, which is underneath it. If you're coloring in the biggest spaces and you're choosing between marker, colored pencil, and crayon, I always suggest crayon or colored pencil. So those are the two that I would choose from as opposed to that marker. Use the marker for your fine details. And then I also wanted to show you how my watercolor paint can come out. You'll notice that there's what's called a gradient of color, where it goes from the darkest at the top to the lightest at the bottom, depending on how much water you use when you're painting. I should show you very quickly here, actually. When you're doing your watercolor paints, I want to make sure if you're new to watercolor painting, you remember you're always mixing your colors on the paper. So instead of mixing color on the palette of paints. This is your palette of paints. You would never put your red into your orange and then your orange into your yellow and into your purple, because that's going to make brown when you're mixing all those colors together. Whenever you're mixing color, you want to be mixing directly on the paper itself. And when I put my water on my brush, I like to tap it. Some friends might use their fingers to squeeze the excess water off, but I choose my color. Let's say I want to do some green painting. I choose my color on my palette and I put it on my paper. If I want to make it lighter, I can always use more water and drag the color down. If you're using copy paper or printer paper, the watercolor paint goes through the paper very easily because it's so thin. So I want you to be careful if you're using printer paper with your watercolor paints not to put too much water on. You don't want to rip your masterpiece. And then if I wanted to mix some yellow in there, I got all my green off in the water, and then with a clean brush, I put my paintbrush back in my yellow and I swirl my paint, and then I can mix directly on the paper. And you see that color blending starting to happen on my paper. Let's get a little bit more yellow on there. Okay, so the color blending and mixing is always happening on your paper instead of in your palette. And let's just show one more. Let's do some orange. Get some nice, beautiful orange paint on my brush and add it. Wow, it looks pretty yellow compared to the green on there. Okay, so the mixing is always happening on your paper. So that's one thing I wanted to show you about our painting. One more thing that I had here to show you. Let's make sure that water's up. Oh, and when you're starting to do painting, if that's one of the things you're choosing to use, maybe you want to put some newspaper down or something on your table because it can get a little messy. So here's one that I've been working on. This is the original one that I've been showing you the last few weeks. And again, so you can see that they're very similar style, same artist drawing them. But I wanted to show you on this one about color blending. So let's see if you can figure out what I used to color this in. I did not use any paints. I used marker for these fine details. The bolded color that you see that really stands out is colored marker. And then in these bigger spaces, I used crayon. And I used crayon on my realistic side also. And before I added any color, of course, I sharpied everything in. I did put colored pencil on the nose, and then I decided that I just wanted to stick with crayon. So if there's a little pop of colored pencil somewhere, or you change how you're adding color in the middle of your project, that's perfectly fine. It's all an experiment or exploring. But look here at this cheek area. I wanted to show you a little bit about color blending. If I wanted to make my skin color on the realistic side, you can't just pick one crayon. You have to pick a few different ones and layer the crayon colors that you're using, because one crayon does not match my skin color. So I would pick maybe a peach color and a brown and a pink, and I could layer my colors on top of them and add shadows, okay? And then you'll notice that I added a little bit of extra pink for my cheek. Same thing on my lips. I added some red and some brown. In my eye is not just one color of brown, even though my eye is very dark. It's a couple different colors of brown. Same with my hair, couple different colors of brown. So I challenge you to work on your color blending, putting layers of color on top of each other and really get those realistic shades, or an abstract wild shade. So this purple skin on my other side, I did color blending of purples and pinks. Okay, so that's that about watercolor painting and color blending. Here I'm gonna show you about color blending and some watercolor painting, just to do it live with you so you can watch my process. And then I'm going to speed it up so you can see the rest of the process itself. So I'm going to start with my abstract side, because the one area that I'm going to choose watercolors is in the hair, which I mentioned I'm inspired by the ocean for this. So I'm gonna start with my blue. So I used my paintbrush in my water to get it nice and wet, and then I put it in my palette of blue, and I got some paint on my brush, and I'm just gonna start adding color to my page. Now remember, if I wanna make it lighter or I want the paint to go farther, all I need is a little water. And again, if you're working on that computer printer paper, too much water is going to make it rip. So be sure you have a paper towel or something nearby that you can blot the water, the extra water off with. And I'm using watercolor paints for the hair because I like the way the paint makes the color move on the page. It reminds me of the movement of water, maybe because I'm using watercolors. One other thing to consider when you start adding color to your page is that watercolor paints have a mind of their own. Notice I'm not staying perfectly in my sharpied lines here. I'm just letting the paint kind of do what it wants to do. I know this is going to be an ear, so I'm trying to at least move out of that space for now. And I'm leaving some of these little sections white because I'm going to add different shades of blue on here. And I'm just letting myself go without too many rules. So then I'm going to come over and I'm going to add a different shade of blue. And I'm going to put more paint on my page here. I'm not going to go in places like this where there's that puddling with my new paint, but I could use my brush to move that puddle of paint around my page, right? So I'm going to add some more color down here. This blue actually is coming out very similar to the other one, but you can notice here that they're different, that dark shade and that light shade. And I'm going to move that puddle of water around my page here, just getting more of those shades of blue on. And in shallow water, I know it looks a little more green, so I might choose kind of this yellowish green to just add some highlighted colors over here. Maybe it gets a little shallower as my hair gets longer. And this is not something I'm expecting you to copy. It's more that I'm just showing you an example of how to add watercolor paints to your self-portrait. Okay, and then I'm going to do maybe one more color. Maybe I'll do a little bit of purple. If this is shallow, then maybe this is the deepest section of the ocean, and I can use that purple highlighted here. Okay, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to add more of this in a little bit, but just to get some color on the page with you now. Now I'm going to show you more about color blending using crayons. Oh, that looks like some purple paint right there. Using crayons. So if I wanted to work on the realistic skin color on my left side of my self-portrait, just like I showed you a moment ago, I'm going to start by layering my first color, which for me, I'm going to use kind of this pale peach. I'm going to come right over here, over my cheek, so I can show you a little bit more of what I mean there. So if I'm going to layer my peach, and then I'm going to add some brown to make my skin darker than that pale peach color. And I know that I can make it darker in certain places that get more sun, like my forehead. When I start moving on my nose, I can make it darker there too. So maybe it's lighter down here on my chin, because my chin doesn't get as much sun, although I'm still going to use some brown. It's not going to be as much as I would use up above. And then I can have some pink, or even a little bit of red in the areas that get even more sun than that. And then I know that my skin isn't always red like that, so I might want to add a little bit more brown over it to make it look more realistic. So again, this is called color blending. And I'm just going to keep layering those colors, the peach, the brown, the reds, the pinks, until my skin tone looks more like my actual color. I can do the same thing for my hair. So if I wanted to make it a really dark brown, which my hair is, I can start shading in with my brown crayon, which nicely takes up space quickly on the page, as opposed to a colored marker, which is going to take you a lot more time to take up as much space. I also like to color in one direction usually, instead of going all over the place like this. And then maybe I want some highlights. My hair tends to get a little bit of orange in it, if you can believe it, when it's in the sun a lot. Okay, so I can layer in some oranges to make it look highlighted from the sun. So I have my color blending going on this realistic side of my face. And I'm gonna keep doing that with you in a moment on high speed. But I just wanted to show you how I'm using crayons to color blend. Now, if I wanted to use marker to do some highlighting, so I'm just gonna pick up a purple and I'm gonna come over, this is a little tiny spot. So I'm gonna add purple to this part of my eyebrow, just to highlight that eyebrow and make it really bold. So what I think I'm gonna do as I'm planning here with you, I'm going to do some of this highlighting on my abstract side with colored marker, and then I'm going to paint the skin area just like I kind of painted the waves of my hair. And I'm gonna stick to crayon on this whole side. So you can see a contrast between crayon on one side and colored marker and paints on my other side. So here is my finished self-portrait. And the last point I wanted to make was just don't forget your background colors. On the left, I shaded a light gray, and on the right, I painted a light brown. So just be sure you have your background colors on there and it'll make your face stand out, and that's it. Thank you for joining me today, artists. I can't wait to see your self-portrait. Please send me a photo of your finished masterpiece, and after you've done that, put the hard copy, the actual masterpiece, in this week's packet for your teacher to grade. So don't forget to do that. You're gonna turn that in this Friday with your class packet in the cafeteria, but take a photo first so I can see how it turned out. Thanks again for being here. I'm going to post a couple more videos for the remainder of Q2. Some of them are going to be geared for upper elementary students, and the other ones will be for lower elementary. So your teacher will send you the right one, and I can't wait to see the rest of the art that you will be making with me. Have a great time. Thank you.